The opinions expressed in the following programs are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect those of Rogers nor Rogers TV.
Hi, and welcome to Politically Speaking. I'm David Shearman. My guests today are Sue Carleton, who is the mayor of Georgian Bluffs, and Niall Lobley, who is their acting or interim CAO. I'm not sure which it is. Is it acting or interim, Niall?
I'll go with either. I'm not sure. I'm not sure we entirely decided on which one, but I'm one of the both.
Well, but just don't call you late for dinner. That's the way it works?
Something like that. Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
George Clooney. I'm referring to myself as the George Clooney of CAOs. Nothing to do with the visage and a lot to do with Hollywood.
Of course. Well, it's that is a subject that is still under discussion and something that is very current for Georgian Bluffs. But to an old doctor once told me the best medicine is tincture of time, and I suspect that is a good prescription for this particular subject. So we shall move on. I was going to say too, or actually ask you about. Niall, I noticed that you've picked up on pickleball at Kilsyth and Kemble. Was that your doing? You've got a recreation background. Was that your doing?
So I suppose for the good of anyone listening, I haven't taken up the art of pickleball. I don't think anybody needs to see that, to be absolutely honest. But no, I think I was part of a conversation, but certainly nothing happens without a team effort here. And so our facilities team has really lent hard into this, set up the arenas for the use. We had it running at all three arenas this summer, very, very popular. We can't obviously accommodate pickleball at this time of year at Shallow Lake any longer because we have ice in. But it's been a really popular program, and we're pleased to see it continuing well into the winter months. And for as long as people are prepared to play, we will be opening up the centres and encouraging people to come down and take part in some pickleball.
Well, that's interesting because you can work up a good sweat playing pickleball, and I know that. Sorry, Sue.
That might be good because the two arenas they're playing in now aren't heated.
Well, I was wondering, they're naturally air conditioned.
That's right, naturally air conditioned.
Works better than better.
Yeah, and it's interesting that it is popular because I confess I know the sport, but I haven't followed it at all. And if you've had good take-up, that's a good thing, which kind of leads me into another thing. One of the interesting things that Georgian Bluffs has done, I think this is that it's you surveyed your ratepayers or the people who live in the community about their priorities for your budget. Do you want to describe that process now?
So we've definitely tried to, through the course of this summer, open up the channels through which community and residents can contact us and talk to us about a whole range of things, and budget was definitely one of them. So we started this with our Engage and Collaborate event over the course of summer, where we welcome people to join members of council and staff at the Grey Roots Museum. We had an afternoon and evening of conversation and discussion on a range of topics, including municipal budgets, what it takes to set a municipal budget, the sorts of things we're spending taxpayers' money on, and the priorities that people might see for that. And then I followed that up with a public engagement process as we start heading into our budget conversations. And that's really an opportunity for residents and community members to share with us what they feel their priorities are, that we should be considering as a township, council should be considering as elected representatives, and staff should be considering as the tool of council, if you like, in starting to form up our budget. And so we see this as an important first step in what would be a publicly open and transparent process. And we'll go through the discussions, which will be open to members of the public to watch and participate in before we get to another round of checking back in with community as we get toward the end of budget process, is just saying, have we got this roughly right? Are we roughly aligned with where your priorities are? Are we roughly aligned with what you had hoped to see in this budget as we go through to final approval early in the new year?
I thought it was interesting that the priorities were and this is not named, well, it is in particular order. It started with roads. Roads were top priority. And that's, I mean, I've been told that among municipal politicians, if you keep the roads fixed, people will be happy. So you're the politician. Is that generally true?
I would think so, because it's not just living on a road that's not up to a standard. It's what does driving that road every day do for maintenance on a vehicle and for, I think, your own psychological. You come home from work or you head out for work on a road that's bumpy. You don't feel good about where you live then. So I think when we can keep roads in a better state of repair, people feel better. They feel somebody's paying attention, because often that's the only thing they see that the township does for them.
Yeah, and keeps the roads clear in winter, and makes sure that the potholes don't get too deep, or if at all. But no, there are some dirt roads in Georgian Bluffs, are there not?
Oh yes, there are still gravel roads.
Yeah. So it's, those have to be graded as well, and the potholes tend to emerge even more in gravel roads.
Yes.
At least they do down in West Grey where I work.
Yeah, definitely. Gravel reacts differently to weather and climate conditions, for sure.
Yeah, don't tell Kevin Eccles I said that. Okay.
Of course I'll tell Kevin.
Of course you will. Of course
Somebody's got to get a rise out of Kevin.
Oh dear. Nothing like municipal politicians getting the dig at each other, is there? It's not uncommon at all. But I think the other thing kind of flows back into the pickleball conversation, because number 2 was recreation and community services. And what is that now? What were the people really saying about that? Were they, because as a rural municipality, you're not known for having a lot of, or at least have not been known for having a lot of recreation facilities that people might recognize in urban areas.
Well, I think for me that speaks slightly to maybe some change that we're seeing in community and a different expectation on what municipal services people expect from their municipality. So obviously, as Mayor Carleton highlighted, roads and infrastructure are always going to be a very, very significant impact on people's lives in municipalities like ours. But I think that we're starting to see a real appetite for the municipality leaning in and helping to support recreation, leisure, tourism, and really adding to the quality of people's lives. And so I think that's what we're starting to see reflected in some of those priorities that are emerging. And we've certainly seen that through the work over the last few years with bodies of work like the focus on the recreation and trails master plan that was done a couple of years ago. This year, the conversations we've had around Kemble Arena, the conversations we've seen at Derby Arena, these have definitely been front and center in people's minds as we've gone through the last few years, and I think we're starting to see that reflected in a hope and an expectation the municipality is able to deliver on quality of life and not just the day-to-day things that people expect municipalities to do, keeping infrastructure in a good state of repair, but also adding that value to their lives beyond that.
Sure, I think it does reflect the change in the demographics, the change in the communities that we're seeing. Cobble Beach is probably a very good example. I was out there this fall myself, and it has grown and it keeps growing. There is ongoing construction, and I'm sure there are other areas which are equally beginning to develop as the housing demand increases and the province places more expectations on municipalities. So, let's go back for a moment to roads, because sometimes I connect things that aren't connected, but here is one that is literally connected by roads. I picked up I do drive Joint Street out through Silver Lake Road in the summer quite a bit. And I noticed this spring that there were new signs on Joint Road, which comes off Highway 6 in Shallow Lake and goes round by, just so people know, goes round by the Shouldice plant. and it runs straight into Silver Lake Road. As you head out there, head west, it becomes Silver Lake Road, and you come out, you cross the county line, and a few concessions, and you end up in the old Emmabelle Township, and you end up at Bruce 13 at Sauble Beach. And again, it's called Silver Lake Road. And I noticed that recently the South Bruce Peninsula was addressing concerns about speeding on their end of Silver Lake Road. But you had a problem from residents along your end of Silver Lake Road, and that solution was what, Sue?
So I'm not even sure of the actual name of them, but they're like a traffic flag that sits up in the middle of the road. And just the fact that it's sitting there tends to slow people down. They don't want to hit it. They don't know what damage it would do to their car. So it slows traffic down, and it makes them, I think, be more aware, because now you've got to watch for something in the middle of the road, which then I think makes you a little more observant as to what's happening elsewhere in the road. And the concern there in Joint Street really had to do with children out on the road or beside the road, waiting for a bus or even just crossing to go play with a friend. And I heard of one incident where someone's cat was killed by someone speeding through that didn't even bother to stop, just kept on going. So there's no need for somebody to be going 80 miles an hour through a residential area. And those traffic, whether they're called pylons or whatever the correct terminology for them is, they really do effectively slow traffic down.
Mm-hmm. Did you see a change or any reduction in the complaints now at the municipality on that issue?
Yeah, definitely a change in complaints, not necessarily a reduction. So I know them as flexible bollards, and they're a fairly common form of traffic calming. And quite often residents raise concerns over traffic in an area and look for speed limit changes or traffic cameras and things like that. And there are a wide range of different ways in which you can calm traffic as it goes through areas. And this is actually a fairly common practice in a lot of residential areas as you head further south, to use these flexible bollards. And just as the mayor said, the idea being to try and heighten the awareness that people might have as they go down that road of the environment they're driving through, and just because of that, slow people down. They're thinking a little bit more, they're slowing down, they're aware of the things that are going on with them. And so definitely did see a change in complaint. We've definitely seen residents that were concerned over speed and driver behavior and driver pattern through the road, have seen that the flexible bollards have created a more calmed traffic area, slowed down speeds, and reduced some of the concerns that residents had expressed in the 2 or 3 years leading up to the installation. We definitely have had some concerns from drivers who popularly use that route as a bit of a back road, and those concerns have definitely been more or less exactly what we had intended to happen with these. The road has become slower, more challenging to drive down. You have to concentrate going down, and you have to slow down. So yes, we have definitely seen some concern and comment brought back. But those concerns and comments actually, in some ways, validate the reason we put those in the first place, which is exactly to do just that, to remind people they're in a residential area, and just to ease off on the gas and take care.
I noticed that people who don't know that area will not realize it, but I'll just describe it very briefly. The road is narrow. Mm-hmm. But it's also, there's a lot of brush and trees which crowd the roadway. And a couple of times in my older truck, I had a radio antenna. I'd hit driving along, the brush would hit the radio antenna, old school. But so it does kind of encroach on the roadway, but there are no sidewalks. There's no curbs. So understandably, the residents are concerned. That's for sure. And it's a nice residential area, don't get me wrong. But I found it interesting that the exact same concern was evident at the far end of Silver Lake Road at Sauble Beach. Exactly the same. The road is narrow. it's populated, and how do we slow traffic down? Maybe you should talk, Sue, to your colleague in South Bruce Peninsula and say, well, maybe we can get together on this. But you did. They are down now because for snow control reasons. Yep. Is that right, Niall? Yep.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So the design of the bollards is actually they're designed so that if an emergency vehicle needed to get through, or if a service vehicle is wanting to get through, they can actually drive quite safely over those. And so there's definitely still space for the larger vehicles when they need access. The one challenge, of course, with this is they rely on a socket in the road. You don't really want that to be torn apart with snowplow operations. So we remove them during the winter months so that snowplows can get down, make sure the road's kept nice and clear, and then they'll go back in the spring.
Are there any other areas that you see as candidates for that particular kind of traffic calming?
So I think it's fair to say that whenever you get a call about traffic and the need to slow things down, we always like to start with asking the why. Is there an underlying reason that we can look at, that we can adjust the reasons why speed might be an issue here, or why there might be a concern? And it can sometimes be sight lines, it can sometimes be additional signage that's required, sometimes it can be looking at whether you do need to put in speed limit reductions and so on and so forth. So I think every situation is unique and the answers to those solutions are unique. However, having said that, I think this has been a cost-effective and very effective solution on Joint Street. And so based on the sort of feedback and the success that we've seen there, I see no reason why we couldn't deploy that if a similar sort of situation arose and they were the right solution for that issue.
Right. Well, it's a fascinating solution, and who knows where it may come up again. I can see places on Owen Sound where it might be useful. So, let's talk a bit about your annual volunteer awards, because you've extended the qualification date or the nomination date until November 16th, which will be after the show is shown for the first time. Sue, what are the volunteer awards in Georgian Bluffs?
I have to think about what those are. So the idea is to celebrate community commitment to it. And we made a slight change. Last year, we'd had a youth and kind of expected there to be a mid-age and then a seniors. We've stayed with the youth, but combined all the rest into one. It's really to say thank you to those people that put a lot back into our community. And one of our award winners last year actually went on and became the provincial award winner as well. Mm-hmm. So that was yes. Bob Knapp. And it's really to celebrate the people that make community happen.
And that's so important, because all too often we become a bunch of negative Nellies. I hate to say it. Yeah. And we forget that it takes people of good intent, good heart, and hard work to make our community. Mm-hmm. So your closing date is the 16th of November, and applications can be made at the municipal office, I presume, or online?
Or online. Go to georgianbluffs.ca/volunteer.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm sure there's people that, if people can think who makes their community work or who's done good work in their community, that's their candidate.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Yep. Good. And just out of curiosity, who makes the decision? Is there a separate jury that makes those decisions, or is it a council decision, or you don't pull names out of a hat?
No. That'll come back to council. If I remember correctly from last year, in a closed session, so that you don't publicly say, well, so-and-so was nominated, but oh no, we're not going to accept them, we'll pick somebody else. You want to be very respectful of these people and of the people who nominated them, because you want them to continue nominating. So it'll be a closed session where we discuss that.
Excellent. That's always good to know the process, not just the end result. And I want to circle back for a moment there. I think it was Niall, it was you who may have mentioned short-term accommodations, or it could have been you, Sue. I'm not sure. There was a mention a moment ago about short-term accommodations. Oh, yes, it was. You were talking about that in terms of the feedback you got. You have been doing a survey on STAs, or you were going to do a survey over the summer. Any results of that, or has anything been pulled together out of that, Niall?
Yeah, it's coming. It's coming. So we're probably looking at December the 6th for bringing back some feedback. We've gathered feedback in a number of different ways over the course of summer on short-term accommodations, and had almost 600 people participate in our online survey, and have had in-person conversations with members of community, members of operators of short-term accommodations, other business owners in the township, trying to understand the impacts of tourism, the value of short-term accommodations for tourism, or the challenge associated to short-term accommodations from a community perspective, and really trying to drill down and better understand what this industry looks like in the township, and how, as a township, we can go about representing and reflecting and addressing resident concerns, whilst at the same time making sure that we're supporting economic development, supporting jobs in our rural economy, and really looking to advance and support the tourism industry in this area, which as we know is absolutely essential in all seasons of the year, not just in the summer season, but as we extend into the shoulder seasons, fall tourism, as we get into the winter. We really do have a great hub here for winter sports, some of the best cross-country ski trails, touch wood that we get some snow this year for them to open up, but snowmobiling, and of course this is such a wonderful place to come and visit in the winter as well. So really year-round tourism, and how short-term accommodations works with that, and how the township can respond to make sure that we're supporting an industry, but doing it in a way which makes sure that we are able to ensure that community remains viable, rich, and that concerns and complaints associated with short-term accommodations and people being on vacation next door to people that are trying to do their 9 to 5, that we're able to manage and support community in all contexts. And so, we've got some findings coming back on December the 6th, and look forward to some good conversation at council chambers, and probably with members of community as well, about where we take it from there.
Do you anticipate either regulation or bylaw coming in the spring?
So the great good fortune is that I am the George Clooney of CAOs and just staff. And so, staff will definitely be preparing some recommendations for council to consider. And regulation, licensing, whatever you might like to call it, is definitely something which is being commonly implemented by other municipalities. But I'll leave the audience on tenterhooks to tune in at 5 p.m. on December the 6th.
Are you sure you're not a politician?
I have no desire to be a politician.
That was a perfect politician's answer. Now it really was. And trust me, I've heard all of the politicians that I interview in Grey Bruce talking about STAs. If there is a common thread in the last 2 years, it has been STAs. And I know it's on Owen Sound's. It's coming up very shortly on Owen Sound's agenda. I've had extensive conversations with the town of Blue Mountains, Meaford. You also, I'm sure, hear about it at the county council, don't you, Sue?
So much at county council.
Mm-hmm.
It hasn't really shown up there, but I know every municipality, like Grey Highlands, has their bylaws and how they're going to control it or hope to control it in place. And they're a little ahead of some of the rest of us. Town of Blue Mountains has been dealing with it probably for longer than the rest of us. I think it's really just come to light as a potential problem in some areas in the other municipalities. And I say that because I know my neighbors who have had one for years, but it's never been an issue because it's been controlled. And it's on a very small scale. And we're also in a more rural setting where you're further away from the neighbors. But for somebody where your neighbor is 50 feet away and somebody's on holidays and wants to party all week, well, that's going to have quite an impact on the neighborhood. So I think those are the areas that are just now coming to light as a problem.
Sure. One of the things I also wanted to pick up on was the feedback priorities, to go back to that particular area, because the third one was economic development. And that feeds into things like short-term accommodations, so many things. Are rural municipalities, is that a change for rural municipalities, Sue, that you are expected to engage in economic development as opposed to supporting existing industries such as agriculture?
I think it's an area we should have always been doing something in. In Georgian Bluffs, we haven't historically done a lot in that area. And I know there's other municipalities in Grey County that would be the same as us. We've to do it for us, and they do a wonderful job. But there's a certain level where we should be doing it to look to what future do we want to be creating in our own home communities rather than on a county-wide scale.
Sure. So it's instead of a made in Grey, it becomes a made in Georgian Bluffs response.
Yes, and I think that makes more sense because every one of us at the lower tier are different. So we might say we're predominantly agriculture, but we've also got all that shoreline and inland lakes and even some of our side roads that have been developed. Those are becoming communities in their own right. So it wasn't good farmland. It became that kind of strip residential development down both sides of the road. But those people need to be working somewhere, and we need to be looking at what can we do for them closer to home.
So it would be fair to say that Georgian Bluffs has become a bedroom, or is acknowledging it's a bedroom community for Bruce Power, for Owen Sound.
Yep.
Yeah.
I would think so, yes.
Okay. It's a very interesting, as we tease this out, it's a very interesting dynamic because I think it shows the change that has happened. It feels, having interviewed your predecessor and some of the priorities of previous council, I see a shift. I see a very clear shift that you are making in terms of who's doing what, how you do it, and what emphasis you put on.
I think, I come back to community all the time. So community used to be thought of as the places like Kemble, Kilsyth, Shallow Lake. And social media, I think, has had something to do with this change as well, because I think of Kemble has their own Facebook page. Shallow Lake has theirs. I'm sure Kilsyth has one. But now you're starting to see it in different areas out in what we would have considered to be rural. So Wilcox Side Road, Side Road 15. They have their own, almost a warning symbol or system, because recently somebody was trying to break into vehicles on Wilcox Side Road, and they were really quick to get the word out to everybody. Watch your vehicles, watch what's going on. Somebody's out there in this kind of vehicle, and they're trying to break into vehicles along this side road. So it's creating a community in areas where we never expected to see it. And at Halloween, Wilcox Side Road did a Sunday afternoon from 2 to 5 trick or treat for the whole neighborhood. The kids had a blast. They were all dressed up. Parents were dressed up, running up and down that road, getting to know each other. And it was good to see even some of the older retired couples calling the little kids by name. I know in the past, and they're looking at doing it again, 15 Side Road, through COVID, because there wasn't a Santa Claus parade in Owen Sound, they did their own. And they started at the back of that side road and came out and joined together on Country Lane and had a really good time coming together. So we're seeing that change throughout the municipality, where people are working together at home instead of always heading off to one of the villages.
That's an interesting reflection, Sue, because I think that it also shows the power of the internet
Yes.
which to support the development of community. Don't get me wrong, there's a lot of things that we could go into and spend the rest of the program talking about the internet. But I think that's a very interesting reflection on how it builds community. Well, at this point, we're going to take a break because, we got a lot more to talk about.
Yep.
So, all right. I'm David Shearman. This is Politically Speaking, and we'll be right back.
This program is brought to you by Ignite TV. Now you're in command. Visit Rogers.com for more details.
You're watching Rogers TV.
Ani, I'm Carolyn King, and I'm a member of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation and the creator of the Moccasin Identifier. Philip Cote, an artist in Toronto here, took and redrew real moccasins. We're starting over with the children. The idea is that they would research whose land their school is built on, near, or what treaty area they're in. And the educational kit that we have has all that information in there. And the children just, love it. My dream is that this province will be covered with moccasin identifiers within the next decade, and they will forever know whose land they're on. That's the goal. Educate and awareness with a nice, simple little program called the Moccasin Identifier.
Hello, Grey County. I'm your warden, Brian Milne. Want to be the first to know about news, services, and decisions in your community? Watch Grey County Council meetings live from the comfort of your living room, right here on Rogers TV, Grey County.
Hi, and welcome back to Politically Speaking. I'm David Shearman. My guests are Mayor Sue Carleton of Georgian Bluffs and Niall Lobley, who is the George Clooney of CAOs. We're not sure whether he's acting, he's interim, whatever, but he calls himself the George Clooney of CAOs, and we'll leave it at that. So welcome back. Welcome back. Now, some of the things that are really interesting are, dare I say, I have not seen all that often. You've developed a corporate climate action plan that has been passed by council. Who wants to open it up and tell us about that?
I think Niall is more knowledgeable on that. I've supported it all the way through. I think we need to be there. I think we need to have that plan in place for the future so we can get funding and grants and such. But Niall's been one of the drivers behind getting that plan in place. So
what's it about now?
Yeah, well, I'll certainly defer to community on this one again, and that's been a bit of a recurring theme today. So, I really did join at the tail end of this race, but community drove this back from 2019, supported by council through 2020, 2021, and 2022, and it's taken a while to get to the finish line, but I think we're in a really good place with the plan. So the plan, in essence, is a roadmap, is a guiding document which is designed to shape decisions of council and the township over the next 30 years. I mean, it's got a long-range vision to it. So it's designed to shape the decisions we make, to make sure that in every decision, we really are focusing on what our impact is on climate and how we can play a role in changing our operations to lower our impact, lower our ecological, our environmental footprint on through the work that we do, but also how we prepare our community and we prepare our operations to respond to the impacts of climate change that indeed we're already seeing. Over the last few years, we definitely have seen changing patterns of weather. We had an excellent delegation at council just last week that really very, very graphically depicted the very significant changes that have occurred in Georgian Bay and around the coastline of Georgian Bay, even over fairly recent years in terms of climate change. And so We have to respond to that climate change in the infrastructure we manage. We also have a responsibility to our community to make sure that our actions seek to mitigate, offset, and lessen our impact so that we're not worsening the situation that we're already in.
So what would be the climate change indicators that were drawn to your attention in that presentation? Because they affect all of us.
Yeah, so I mean, I think the one that was for me, I think in many respects, some of them that were talked about specifically last week were around the change in ice patterns within the bay here, and the fact that we get less ice. In fact, last year we got essentially no ice, but we get less ice, less stable ice, less extensive ice, and less reliable ice than we've had in the past. And as I say, an absence of ice for a large part. I've never experienced ice in Georgian Bay, and I know, speaking to people that have been here for many years, like the mayor, the days of the bay freezing over and ice huts being quite far out, fishing huts being quite far out in the water behind us. But I think the one for me that really resonated very strongly was the change in wind patterns, and it was perhaps something which I hadn't focused on enough, was the impact of wind on the bay and the increased frequency of windier days, not necessarily storm days, but days where there are higher wind speeds, and the impact that has on fishing was what this was being drawn back to, was the accessibility of the lake for small fishing craft, and the fact that wind patterns have changed, and that limits the amount of time that craft can be out in the lake and setting nets, pulling in nets, and gathering fish. And so I think it was a good presentation, and really did bring back, to me, for a very personal reason, the impact that those changes have had on one family's existence in terms of subsistence farming and fishing for market on Georgian Bay. And so I think that was it was a really good presentation that really, for me, brought back this huge issue, which sometimes we feel isn't a personal issue and an issue which doesn't really affect us in a day-to-day way. It actually really, for me, clearly highlighted exactly why this does impact people on a day-to-day basis.
Sure. As someone who watched that presentation, Sue, how did you react?
So the same thing really caught me, the ice, because my son just turned 40 years old this past March. And when he was born, I was working at Russell Brothers right on the bay. And at noon hour, that's what some of the men that worked there, either before work, at noon, and after work, they were out in that bay on the ice. And they were going out with snowmobiles and that type of thing. Well, it's been years since we've seen that. And I think it was also the effect that lack of ice has on a whole fishing industry, and what fish are available now as compared to what fish used to be out there. And the fact that it's happened in my son's lifetime, I think that's what really blew me away. People say, oh no, there's not been any change. But when I think back to the amount of snow we had, and we're in the country, the number of days I couldn't even get to the highway because of the amount of snow that had come down. So that's been a huge change for us, and in one lifetime.
Sure. I resonate with all of that, because I do remember almost 25 years ago when I first moved to Grey County. Yes, I remember ice huts out on the ice, fairly far out. Thompson's Hole, I think, is one of the places that they would put a lot of ice huts out, but I haven't seen them for a few years now.
No.
So, well, we shall see what we shall see. But now, how will this action plan affect planning? Like, for example, are you looking at changing from internal combustion engines to either diesel or gas to battery or hydrogen or other power systems at all?
Yeah, so I think that the plan is only as good as the implementation of the plan, to be honest. But the plan sets the context for trying to address our emissions. So we set a target. We understand what our emissions are today. We've established some targets that we would like to at least achieve, if not better, as we go through various different milestones of the plan. And we've established some broad areas in which action can be taken, in which we can drive down those targets. And certainly the two big ones, no surprise here, it's exactly the same for every other municipality, and indeed in our personal lives. The two biggest areas you can have an impact are in the way in which you travel and the building that you occupy. And so they're going to be two major focuses for us going forward. Adapting our fleet as we go through. We buy new vehicles. We have to buy new vehicles every now and again. Let's think about climate when we're buying those new vehicles. Let's make sure we're looking at the technologies that are coming today and what the technologies of the future are going to be. And, there are a range of zero-based emission vehicles that we could look at. And certainly I think our fleet of the future, just like our fleet today, is a diverse fleet. I remember when we used to have leaded and unleaded gasoline, and now, of course, we have just gasoline and diesel, but we've always had a blended fleet. And so I suspect what will end up happening is we'll have a blended fleet in the future, and that blended fleet will probably change from diesel and gas to being hydrogen, biogas, electric, and who knows what other technologies are coming around the pipeline. And, as we've seen this summer, this is a hub for modern day energy production, with hydrogen announcements in Sound, the work that's going on at Bruce Power, indeed some of the conversations over in Meaford at the minute. They're all focused on the energy sectors of tomorrow, and so the fleet of tomorrow will look different to the fleet of today, and so we need to get ourselves prepared for that. Now, I suppose on the building side of things, it's how do we invest in that infrastructure to make sure that it is minimizing and lessening our impact through emissions and so on and so forth, as we make decisions over new buildings, retrofits, improvements, repairs to existing buildings. How do we make those decisions with good environmental thought going into them?
Do you anticipate things like building with heat pumps, things like charging stations?
Absolutely.
That's something the municipality will get into.
Absolutely. And in fact, council has already approved through budget 2023 us putting in some electric vehicle recharging stations in the township. So we've got them both for community members and for our own potential use in the future. And so we've been holding off on that, waiting for the provincial and federal grants to open up, which they did in the last couple of weeks. So hopefully we'll be able to move forward on that, working in partnership with Grey County, just to make sure we get the right networks in the right place. We want these in the right places that people need them. So, yes, definitely to that, definitely to changing the fleet, looking at renewable energy where we might be able to implement a little bit more of that. And the other thing that came across really strongly through some of the community engagement were two things that perhaps have been light on in the first round of the plan, which were the role of the municipality as demonstrating community leadership. So the importance that it is for others to see us taking action, not necessarily for just the value of the action, but for the being seen to take the right action. So I think that's an important part. And then, the other one that came through loud and clear was, what are we doing to offset these impacts? We know we're going to have impacts. We know we're already having impacts. How can we start to offset those by leaning on our natural environment, investing in our natural environment, and increasing the resilience of our natural environment to the changes that we're causing? And so I think there's a focus in the plan on that as well.
Yeah. Well, it'll be interesting to see how it plays out, because Sue, dare I say it, you're not going to be around forever.
No. And I don't plan on staying on council for the rest of my life. At some point, I am going to retire.
What?
There's a life after being a councillor. Look at that.
That's right. Imagine that.
And who knows? It may not even be your decision.
That's right. Somebody else could decide that for me.
That's right. Because the voters rule. The voters rule.
They do. And it's a good thing.
Exactly. That's why we call it democracy.
That's right.
One of the other things I wanted to talk about was something that came up, I think it came up recently, or it is about to come up, and that's the Potawatomi Village water proposal. That is the first concrete idea I have seen before me. I was impressed by it because it's elegant. It shows that there's a possibility. I always kind of thought, gee, Potawatomi Village, far side of the river. Gee, do they have to go down Nichols Gully Road? My golly. Well, no, it comes the other way. It comes south from existing water mains in that come off of Owen Sound. And it's not a long distance either.
No, it's probably the best solution that we've come up with. And what I like about it is, and that'll be on in front of council tonight, but it also fits in very well with expanding the East Lytton water system. So at some point then, by servicing Potawatomi by coming through Summer Street, that then at some point we can split that off into our own water system and not then be reliant on the city. And at the same time, I appreciate that the city is willing to work with us to help us find a solution there. So that, I think, has been the biggest part of it, the fact that we can work with the city to arrive at a solution that works for everybody. It'll help pay down some debt on their water system, and it helps get water out to some of our residents that need a better source of supply.
Sure, and I noticed there was a component of fire protection there, which was very much in the news in the last month or so. There was a fire out there in that subdivision, yes. And they did have to relay water out of the Owen Sound system at the top of the Alpha Street Hill across Nichols Gully, as I recall.
Yep. So
another benefit of having a fully extended water system.
Yeah, so that's we hope anyway. After this evening's conversation and council ratification, there's still quite a lot of work to do. We believe that we've got a good viable solution here. We've got to hammer down that agreement with Owen Sound, continue to work with them towards a collaboration and a partnership on this one, work together to achieve a good result, and hopefully, that will allow fire suppression as well as an alternative water source to address resident needs. And then, as Mayor Carleton says, the really good thing about this is it fits into a longer term picture. Is the anticipation here is to build a system which serves residents of 50 years, and you just mentioned when the mayor is no longer here, the residents that will be here when I'm not here as well. So definitely planning for the future.
Right. The other thing I want to lift up too is that, as I recall, Sue, that when we talked initially, one of the hallmarks that you certainly wanted to you built your campaign on was working with neighboring municipalities, working with Owen Sound, and that was one of the things that, and certainly it came the other way. That I heard that also from Owen Sound. So this is a tangible result of that kind of intent, it looks like.
Yes. And I think as politicians, we tend to get stuck on our borders. The residents of the municipalities don't see those clearly defined edges, so to speak. And Mayor Boddy has said that all along. He would erase the borders. And I agree with him. We can still work for our own residents in certain ways without limiting ourselves from working with each other for the benefit of everybody. And It's not being tunnel visioned on what's Georgian Bluffs and not looking at everybody else. We have neighbors all around us. We can work with all of them.
Yeah, for sure. Well, let's move into some good news stuff here, because I was quite impressed that recently you honored your firefighters, inter-township firefighters, 125 years of service cumulative. That's quite remarkable.
We have an amazing group of men and women working at Inter-Township Fire Department, serving both Georgian Bluffs and part of Meaford. And I enjoy, that's the second year I've got to go and take part in their celebration where they honor each other. And it's a really fantastic experience and feeling to be there. So I can't thank them all enough, because they give up a lot to make sure everybody else is safe.
Yes, I know a couple of people who are on Inter-Township, and we'll be in a meeting together, and all of a sudden they just get up and take off.
Yep.
They just take off. And you learn later, oh yeah, there was a fire somewhere or an accident, because they also respond to collisions. And often they're the ones that rescue people out of vehicles because they've got the jaws of life. So it's and I would be remiss if I didn't say to folks, remember, you see that green flashing light, pull over.
Yep.
That's your community.
I had an incident the other night where I pulled out of my place and I could see line of traffic coming with a green light flashing in the middle of it, and people weren't getting out of the way. Even though people going my way were pulling over, it didn't seem to trigger them that they needed to get over out of the way for that guy.
Yeah, it's you wonder what it's going to take. You wonder.
Yep.
You're not more important than your neighbor, so pull over. Just pull over if you see a green light.
I think it's that people don't even know what that green flashing light means. So we need to get more education out there in that regard. And I know there's some signage up and such. There needs to be more.
Sure. Maybe there's a Rogers TV commercial in there. Who knows?
That's right.
I hope my producer is listening to that, but I'll leave it to the Rogers people to figure that one out. Well, let's. The other thing I noticed, some other good news. You want to talk good news? Is your annual events calendar is out.
Yes. And that calendar, the artwork in it now, there were 50.
There you are now. Good.
Put in over 130 photos, with the idea of having that photo in that calendar this year. So it's been outstanding. The people that look forward to that to contribute to it each year. And it's a beautiful calendar. And it gives a lot of really concrete information about the municipality. Talks about areas, recycling garbage, that type of thing. It's information as well as beauty.
And it's free.
It is free.
It is free.
It is free, and it's available. I noticed that the list was extensive. Although I had
at the township office, at the community centers, and at a variety of businesses throughout the township.
One little thing.
What?
Foodland you list as being in Owen Sound.
No, I think it's at other places in Owen Sound because we're very clear that Foodland is in Georgian Bluffs.
You check that. I'm going by what was on the webpage. It's in the two grocery stores, Food Basics and Foodland, in Owen Sound. And I'm thinking, oh my goodness.
I think we just touched on the fact that municipal borders are fluid.
That's right. They are fluid. But now, who's the politician? Who's the politician here? Come on, who's the politician? But no, in all seriousness, those municipal calendars are great works of art. Did I hear you say you had over 100 submissions, Sue?
130.
Oh my goodness.
Mm.
Yeah, and you've only got 12 photos to choose? How many photos did you actually choose?
So some of those pages have more than one photo on it.
Okay.
I have to find my paper that tells me how many now. More than 50 contributors of over 130 photos. So it doesn't actually tell me how many when in the calendar. But some of those pages have multiple pictures on them.
Sure. And now, Niall, you were saying you remembered the day when, was it you who remembers the day when staff actually had to go out and take photos?
Oh, that was me.
Oh, that was
the very
you,
first year, our clerk at the time brought it forward to council as a suggestion. And we said, yeah, okay, you go ahead. And she had put a budget in, what it would cost and what she thought the value of it would be. And we gave her instruction to go ahead with it. And I think she had to go take all the pictures herself and put it together. And that carried on that way for another couple of years with staff getting all the pictures. And then it slowly switched to other people contributing.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's a great way to build community when you think about it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, because if your picture made it to that calendar, you're going to make sure all your friends and neighbors know that you're in the calendar.
Of course. And what a great promotional tool for Georgian Bluffs. No, I'm not going to say give them as Christmas presents. Stocking.
You can hand them out as stocking stuffers or presents. And for anyone that didn't get their photo in, keep your eyes peeled on our website and various other promotions that we'll be putting out over the next 12 months, because we've got an amazing catalogue of photos that were taken. So it was hard work picking the ones that made it into this, but the rest have definitely been kept on the back burner and will be used, I am confident, in other ways, shapes and forms as we go through the next 12 months.
Well, that's great. And it's a great way for community to engage in what is what the community is. So it sounds like you are really building some strength in the community or around the community as well. Yep. Good. Now, we've probably got a couple of minutes left, but Sue, I just wanted to ask you, put your county councillor's hat on, and what's happening with the county budget?
I'm going to say that I think County Council is taking a deeper look at the budget this year. So we started at 12.12%. I think one of the mistakes that County Council has made in the last few years is, instead of really taking a deep dive into it and looking at what has been taken out or not done, we've sent it back to staff and said, we want you to come in at this rate. And staff have gone and done that work, and we haven't known what got excluded. And I think if we had have not given that instruction, if we had taken a better look at that time each year at what was being excluded, we wouldn't now be where we are, because we might have gone an extra % or so. It's going to be a tough one to get down much further without hurting ourselves in future years by not putting into reserves, because that may be the only way we can get that budget amount down. But if you take $1 million out of the roads reserve that you don't put in this year, we're going to pay that price 5 years from now when that money's not there and we need it. So I'm glad to see all of council on the same page with, let's work through this with staff together instead of just telling staff to do it for us.
Right. So council itself is well engaged in the budgeting process.
Yes, very much so. And it's good to see. Yes.
And I know that with the warden on, he has said very similar thoughts. So we will look forward to that. We will certainly look forward to that. Well, guess what? We've just run out of time. Well, almost. So, Niall Lobley, thank you. Always a pleasure to see you again. And of course, Sue, pleasure to have you back again. And you'll be back before Christmas. So
yes, I will.
We will certainly
with the treasurer
talk again.
next time.
Gotta get my budget questions ready.
But
anyway, and you friends, thank you for joining me on Politically Speaking. I'm David Shearman, and absolutely, we'll be talking again.
Call the Rogers TV viewer response line, email us, or connect with us on social media.
Hi, I'm David Shearman, host of Politically Speaking. Join me for my next show, where my guest will be Sue Carleton, mayor of Georgian Bluffs. Politically Speaking on Rogers TV.
This is a man's heart, a heart in desperate need of medical attention. But because 78% of Indigenous people experience racism in health